Just keep playing a bit more, Luke, or?
Yeah, just if you can give us another minute, that'd be amazing.
You bet. Bit more, Luke, or are we okay?
No, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for playing us in.
My
All
pleasure.
right, everyone. Hello. Hello out there on YouTube. Um, I'd like to welcome you all, first of all, and then welcome John to the channel. I think this is the first thing John's done on our YouTube. We've done a lot of stuff for the website, but this is our first real public thing together. So it's a pleasure to have you here.
Happy to be here with you, Luke.
I need to fix my lighting. I'm a little bit dark. One sec.
You're a little bit dark.
Yeah. There
What
we
we're
go.
doing?
That should do it. Oh, that did nothing. Okay, so today
Jazz
we're
lighting.
going to be covering some of the information, doing a little bit of a teaser, and a bit of a talk about the melodic minor scale, because John has this new book out, which I'll tell you all about in a little bit. But before we get to that, actually, John, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your history and your background?
Sure, Luke. First of all, it's a pleasure to be working with you on Guitar Vivo. And we've had the pleasure of meeting a few times in person in the UK, and I hope to see you when I'm back there in November. I'll be there again. So I grew up on the East Coast of the States in Connecticut, and then I moved down near New York City in the mid-'70s. And at that point, I didn't have any illusions about getting hired quickly in New York, but I thought I was good enough to start sitting in and meeting folks. So that's what I started doing. And I found a little piano bar in Greenwich Village where I used to go sit in for free with good piano players and bassists. And one night, a man named David Friesen walked in, and he sat in too. He lives in Portland, Oregon, or lived in Portland, Oregon at the time, and he still lives here. So we became friends there, sat in and played a bit together there. And then in the summer of 1976, he invited me out to Oregon. I had no plans to live on the West Coast. And 3 weeks turned into a whole summer of small gigs that he found for us. And we started to develop a nice musical rapport. And that turned into about 7 years of touring. That was my introduction on the road with David. And actually, we haven't played in many years together. And we just played together again in January of this year. I think we're going to hopefully play a bit more together. So I started doing some more tours with him. We did some international travel all over the States. We went to Russia one time with Paul Lauren, Europe, Australia, lots of different places. So that was my introduction to the road with him. And that's when I started doing workshops and really trying to develop some serious teaching skills. And over the years of doing lots of workshops, obviously you get better presenting the material and talking to groups of folks and organizing your own musical thoughts. That eventually became some lessons, online lessons, books, courses, and I'm very happy to be doing this book for you. So still out there on the road, 40 plus years in, and after I kind of wound down my touring with David in 1983, I wanted to see if I could keep going on my own, which thankfully I have been able to do with a network of friends like you. So I've played and taught all over the world, no manager, no agent, just a network of friends, and we help each other with playing and teaching. So I've done it all over Europe, Argentina, some in Asia, all over the US and Canada, just with a network of friends. And so here we are still doing these tours. And basically, I think that if I'm lucky, my best work might still be ahead of me. I still have the energy to set up this work with the help of friends and still love to teach and play.
That's amazing. Yeah, sorry, just to go back. Yeah, it's an absolute honor to have you again. You don't have to thank me. But that's some really interesting stuff there. But something you didn't talk about is how you learned and where you studied. Because one thing that you're known for is a really unique approach. Are you mostly self-taught?
No, then I neglected to mention my teachers, and I should. So when I grew up in Connecticut and started to get interested in jazz in my late teens, early 20s, I had the good fortune to have two teachers that really helped me, one guitarist and one pianist. The guitarist was a man named Link Chamberlain, and you can find a few records that he did for the Muse label. I don't sound anything like him. He kind of sounded like John McLaughlin, very fast, dense, interesting stuff, but he could play in a variety of styles, was kind of a local legend in Connecticut, and did a bit of touring and recording, but decided to focus primarily on his teaching, which he was quite successful with. So I think he was sometimes teaching 30, 40 hours a week. It really was a full-time job for him. And he was the one that gave me an approach to the melodic miter that I still use, that's covered in my book, which we'll talk about. And he basically told me to try to find my own voice. He encouraged me to listen, but he didn't really say you had to transcribe or copy necessarily. Just be aware of the tradition and try to find your own way. So that's what I decided to do. I didn't really copy anybody, although I've listened to everybody. I think I'm a student of the music and have certainly people that I love and who have influenced me. But I never transcribed or really try to copy anybody's solos per se. I just try to develop my own vocabulary. And you can't really choose to be original. That just happens organically. So in my case, also, it's influenced by other instruments besides the guitar. I think some of my comping really is influenced more by piano players, quite honestly. Jim Hall had something that really resonated with me when he said, listen to horn players to learn how to breathe and leave intentional space on the instrument. I'm paraphrasing him a little. So that's very important to me, this idea of leaving space, not trying to fill all the space up. So I'm not really a bebop player, although I know a bit of that language. So space to me is very important. And that's something also that I got from Jim. And my other teacher was a man named John Mehegan, who was a pianist who'd come up in New York in the 50s and 60s. And when I met him, he moved out to Connecticut. And I ended up sitting in with him on a little weekend gig that he had at a restaurant in Connecticut, near where I grew up. And I was just good enough to kind of stay out of his way and solo, to play something that sounded sort of like a jazz solo, but he knew I was serious. And he let me solo on every tune. He was just playing standards. And so very often he would just begin a tune and not even tell me what he was playing. So I had to somehow figure out enough of the chord changes and key centers to play something. So pretty good training in terms of repertoire and developing my ear. And John wrote some of the very first books just describing jazz theory. And I think I'm not sure if those books are still in print, but he certainly knew his theory. So between John Mehegan and Link Chamberlain, I had a pretty good grounding in sort of private study. And I studied and eventually played a little bit with both of them for a couple of years. And then since then, I've tried to expand and refine my own teaching just based on my experience initially with private lessons, then workshops, online courses, books, etc.
Well, I think that's actually how I found you. I think I bought your book and your True Fire course. It
Great.
must be about 12 or 15 years ago now. Or maybe
Right.
about that. Maybe 10. I'm giving away my age, but yes. And I was blown away by it, so I had to get in touch with you to do something together. Before we start, I think it's going to be really interesting. I know we're going to go into the melodic minor scale, but what we're going to talk about, this is really your approach to learning every scale, isn't it? This is how you look at all of the material. We're going to go through it one by one. We'll talk through a few of the modes, um, but
Sure.
this kind of you study them. I'm trying not to give too much away. Let me let me just hand it over to you and say, can you give us the basics on the melodic minor scale? What is it, and how should people start with it?
Sure. Well, I think it's the easiest intro to it is to think about a major scale with a third flatted. In classical music, the melodic minor on the way down is actually the Aeolian minor with a flat 6 and a flat 7. But in jazz, we really just think of those as separate sounds. I certainly play Aeolian minor and melodic minor, and sometimes I'll mix them together, which I guess really is more or less the harmonic minor. But I really think of the melodic minor just as a major scale with a third flatted. We can do this with chords, scales, and arpeggios. So if you know a C major chord, the very simple way to get to a C melodic minor chord is just simply to flat the third. So take some basic C major inversions. I'm just dropping the third down in these very simple C major inversions that a lot of your listeners probably are aware of. So I'm just taking major, melodic minor, and so forth. So a good place to start is the scale, obviously. So we know we can play as the scale. My own improvising, as you know from our time together, is more leaning towards the arpeggios because we hear the sounds of the chord this way. So if you can take a C major arpeggio, C, E, G, B, and simply make the E and E flat, then we have a nice melodic minor. You notice I'm also playing. So I'm also combining positions. You can start initially by just doing the individual positions. So here's C major, and here's. So do that in every position, but then start to get a little bit freer with it. So this idea of combining positions, you can do that in a kind of a programmed way. Initially, choose a particular string to make your transitional string. So maybe I use the D string as my transition. If we want to create modified arpeggios over that one minor, the first mode, we can also pull in some notes that are common both to Dorian minor and melodic minor, Luke. So I can add the 9 or the 6. If we take a G major triad, which is a major triad a fifth above, and simply put an E flat in the bass, that's a nice C minor major 9. So that means by extension, any G major triad is going to give us a nice C minor major 9. So that means I can take a G major triad and mix that together with C melodic minor. Here's my C melodic minor, and here's my G triad. So essentially, we can add other notes from the scale to create modified arpeggios. We can add the 6. So this gives me this. A bit like the whole tone scale because we have the G and the A and the B there. So essentially, we can create modified arpeggios. But a good place to start in terms of a basic introduction, if some of your viewers are not familiar with melodic minor, is simply take major scale, major arpeggio, major chords, and flat the third. So in every position, yeah, comment or question?
Yeah, a lot of students I meet and players I meet, when they're going through material like this, arpeggios, they only ever practice it in a position. So they might practice one position, the open 3 frets, or the first shape, the second shape, and the third shape. When you're developing this stuff, do you spend more of your time, instead of just running a single position, actually just trying to creatively find your way up and down the fretboard?
Absolutely, because when we're soloing, especially on slower tempos, it's nice to be able to play some ideas that encompass 2-3 octaves. We don't want to be stuck in one place. So initially, do the little cage system where you're in one position up and down, great, and then do that in 5 places on the neck so that you have the whole neck covered, basically. But then, as I just said a minute ago, try to find some ways to connect the positions. And you can just do that by choosing a string as a transition, as I just demonstrated. So once you've got 4 or 5 of those transitional kinds of fingerings where you're combining positions memorized, then the neck becomes something that's accessible to you. You don't need to work out exactly where you're going to change. I'm also using chord shapes to help me navigate some of those transitions from position to position as well. So if I can see a chord shape like this, so if I can see these shapes, then I can so the chord shapes also help me make the transitions. And our book is full of chord shapes too, obviously. And just a quick aside about chords, don't be intimidated by lots of unfamiliar chord shapes if you're looking at a book. I think the way to retain chords, you and I've talked about this in person a few times now, is to use them in the context of an arrangement. So say you're playing a minor blues or a simple tune that you know already, and just try to work into that arrangement a couple of different melodic minor fingerings that are new to you in that arrangement. And then those shapes will be shapes and sounds that you can retain and use elsewhere to accompany, to use as a template for single lines and so forth. So, you can do it in a very systematic way. I don't do it quite that way, but some people do, where you have specific string sets in the harmonized scale. I do a little bit of that. But just go to a place on the neck and say minor major 7, minor major 9, minor major 6, minor major 6, 9, and so forth. So just locating those notes relative to the basic chord shape, you're going to start to find some sounds that work. So that's the way I've done it. It's kind of intelligent guesswork using formulas as opposed to really systematic harmonized scales. I'm doing some of the harmonized. We'll talk a bit about the harmonized scale too, if you like, which is also useful. So that first mode just tells us that the major 7th interval works over the minor chord, Luke. That's the first mode of the melodic minor. And if we're in the key of C, I'll also be kind of on the lookout for open string possibilities. So in this particular key, the open B string is a nice sound to use with a simple minor. So there's just a minor 1, 5, minor 3rd, and then the major 7 on top. Here's a minor 6th. That's what I like. Open strings work best probably if you're sitting on a chord for a while or playing a slower tempo. But that means potentially any C minor shape with the open B string is going to be melodic minor or harmonic minor. So that means I'll just simply take minor triads. Minor 9. So I'm just grabbing minor shapes and using that open B string. So essentially, we don't want to overdo the open strings, but I'm always kind of on the lookout for those. If I'm playing a chord melody or a slower tempo or sitting on a chord, if it's a rubato setting, the open string can be a nice transition sometimes.
Nice. So I think the next thing you touched on was the harmonized scale.
Sure.
Is that...
It's pretty easy, actually, because 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 are the same chord quality. So if we go up the scale, look, here's C minor major 7. 2 is minor. 3 is augmented major. 4 and 5 are both dom. And 6 and 7 are both half diminished. So depending on how long I'm sitting on the chord, just like we can go up and down the harmonized major scale, if I'm sitting on C major for a long time, I might play C major, D minor, E minor, or C major, D minor, G7. I might just touch on some of the different chord qualities of the major scale if I'm sitting on C major for a while. And similarly, if I'm sitting on C melodic minor for a while, say we're playing a minor blues or it's a modal tune, anything where I'm sitting on a chord for more than a bar, I might grab portions of that harmonized scale. So I might go. So that was just kind of randomly grabbing. I was creating little progressions there using some variation on some of the harmonized scale there. And then by extension, as we get into some of the other modes, we can also grab the harmonized scale in the other keys relative to a dominant major or minor chord. So the harmonized scale is relatively easy to remember. If you can remember 1, 2, and 3, 4 and 5 are the same chord quality, 6 and 7 are the same chord quality. So again, minor major, minor 7, augmented major, 4 and 5 are dominant, 6 and 7 are half diminished.
And then, just out of interest, where would you use this melodic minor scale? You said you mentioned you use it on minor chords, but is that on? Would you use it on a 1, a 2, and a 6? Is it kind of fair game anywhere?
Well, yeah, I mean there are three modes of the melodic minor that are usable over the minor chord. So the one we just talked about is the first mode. The second mode essentially works over both dominant and minor. That's the equivalent of melodic minor, a whole tone below. So this is the concept that Link Chamberlain gave me. So if I think about a B flat melodic minor over C minor, that essentially gives me a mode that's in between Dorian and Phrygian. So some people call this Dorian flat 2, some people call it Phrygian 6. So if I play a B flat melodic minor shape, here's B flat minor major 7 or minor major 9. If I put a C in the bass, this gives me essentially that flat 2. There's the D flat. Another thing that I'll do, Luke, is sometimes just take the really basic arpeggio of the chord quality and then combine that with the melodic minor mode. So I can either take C melodic minor and B flat melodic minor, which kind of sounds whole tony because we're essentially moving in whole steps. So here's C minor and B flat melodic minor. Here's C Dorian and B flat melodic minor. Here's C melodic minor and B flat melodic minor. I'm putting that C in the bass so that we're perceiving the B flat melodic minor as a C minor. So I'll go back and forth between C melodic minor and B flat. And I can also take the harmonized scale now in B flat melodic minor over C minor. So I could take B flat melodic minor, C minor 7, E flat, and so forth, E flat 7, F7, etc. So I'll play all those things over C minor too. Now, how much tension do I want to use? How much time do I want to devote to sounds that are not strictly whatever the C minor happens to be? This depends on how long I have to play over C minor. Is there another chordal instrument in the group? How much tension the other musicians use in reference to their playing? So as you get comfortable with these sounds, you also get a sense of when it's appropriate to use them. Our goal is not to play lots of tensions all the time, obviously. Our goal is to have all this information available to us as vocabulary, which is just repetition. That gives us the ear training. So one exercise might be going back and forth between C and B flat melodic minor. So there's... that could be a little exercise. And what that B flat melodic minor again is giving us is the equivalent of a mode in between Dorian and Phrygian. It's got the flat 2 and the 6. So that's the sound that I've been using for a long time. Here's another interesting thing that happens as a particular sound becomes available to you in your own improvising. You also have the ability to recognize that when you hear someone else play it. Either they're copying for you or you're trying to analyze a portion of a melody or a solo, and you hear that sound and you recognize it because you're playing it. Ear training is just repetition of sound, basically. That's all it is. So if I play this sound enough, I know what it is. That's that melodic minor whole tone below the second mode. So there's B flat melodic minor and C minor. It's all B flat melodic minor, but I'm thinking C minor.
So out of interest, you said you can hear when other people do that.
Yeah.
I've never come across this before talking to you, never came across some of these ideas. Is that something you hear a lot, or is it something that you...
yeah, you sure hear it in musicians, even going back to the 60s. If you hear Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock in 1965, they're playing those sounds, probably earlier. Wow. And it's certainly in the modern jazz vocabulary. If you listen to Michael Brecker or Pat Metheny or Kurt Rosenwinkel or guys who've been playing from the 60s on, you're going to hear it. Absolutely. And you'll be able to, again, if you play something enough, you'll recognize it when you hear someone else play it in their solo or in a melody you're trying to analyze. You'll hear it. And why not write a song that has that sound in it? I mean, my feeling is the best way to really get comfortable with a new sound is to make yourself play it over and over again. And then over time, you develop a vocabulary with it. And then again, your ability to recognize it in other musicians will be there too. So, basically, sometimes the most appropriate harmonic choice when you're playing with other musicians is a very simple choice. Other times, it's nice to have access to some of these tensions. So that one tension actually is not, it's pretty subtle actually, especially if I put it on top of the chord. If I play B flat melodic minor over C minor this way, and that tension is pretty obvious, it's on top. If it's in the middle of the chord, not so obvious. Here's a, but it's definitely there, but now it's in the middle of the chord. And I think a good default mode, Luke, if I'm comping for somebody else, is to put a tension in the middle of the chord so that it doesn't require the soloist to reference that sound as well. You know, an accompanist could make a soloist sound like they're playing bad note choices with chords that don't fit the context of what the soloist is doing. So if you're using tensions as the top voice, treat it as a passing tone and get off it kind of quickly. If it's in the middle of the chord, it's less of an issue. So, you know, lots of B flat melodic minor chords and portions of that B flat harmonized melodic minor scale could work as versions of C minor. And they all reference that, most of those voicings, if not all, reference some combination of 6 and flat 2, which is that Phrygian 6 or Dorian flat 2. So that's a, you know, it's essentially a Dorian scale with one tension introduced. That's really all it is. And so that's the sound I've used for years. And I don't always use it, but I definitely use it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, repetition gives you that sense of having it available to you as vocabulary.
Incredible. I'll just take a little moment there to mention the book. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it is in the description. You might have to refresh your browser. You can pre-order John's book on melodic minor scales and modes, where he actually gives you a lot of material to get this into your ear. There's etudes for every mode, as well as arpeggios, scale fingerings, all that kind of stuff. And also blues etudes, where he puts all this stuff into practice as well. So there's loads of, so someone's asked about, you know, is this a bit too theoretical? There's loads of musical examples in there where you can get this stuff into your ear, and you'll be able to appreciate it a lot more once you do that. You might, I mean, would you agree, John, if you're new to these sounds, you might actually find it difficult to get into, or not difficult to appreciate until you've actually spent some time working with them?
That's right. And I mean, my goal is not to make everyone else sound like me. My goal is just to say, here's some information, start with my idea, then create your own variations. And to some people's ears, my playing might sound pretty dissonant and maybe not necessarily sounds that they would want to reference specifically in their own solos. But our goal with the book, Luke, is just to make these sounds available to people, hopefully find their own variations. But this information that we're talking about has been in the jazz vocabulary, as I said, for probably 50, 60 years. So I'm not inventing anything here. I'm just giving you my take on it. And, you know, if a particular sound doesn't grab your ear, that's really okay. You may find yourself coming back to it later as your own vocabulary, or my musical preferences actually, and how I approach this is still slowly evolving and changing. So you may find something that is maybe not so accessible to you or so pleasing to your ear now. Coming back to something in 5 years, you think, wow, I like this now, just based on what I've done in the last 5 years of my own development and homework. So if, you know, if something doesn't resonate with you, then don't stress about that or assume you have to learn it. Move on to something else in the book. You may find something else that grabs your attention. These sounds, if they're new to you, will sound perhaps dissonant, but hopefully the examples in the book where I'm trying to approach them as melodies maybe makes them a bit more accessible. And don't be intimidated by the theory. You know, just take, with any good book, open it and find one page that resonates with you, that looks appealing, and start there. But I think everybody can have access to the melodic minor very quickly if you just take major scales, chords, and arpeggios and flat the third. Then you're in the door in terms of the basic sound of the melodic minor. That's a good place to start if this is all new information for you.
I think the other thing is as well is, you know, you mentioned that this is part of the contemporary jazz vocabulary. You need to be able to hang with people that are going to play this stuff and identify this when it's thrown at you, so you can accompany them.
Absolutely. And again, another thing that I suggest, assuming that hopefully most of your viewers are playing with other musicians, one of the best ways to feel like you're understanding something well is to explain it and share it with somebody else. Let's open a book, hopefully man, maybe, but anybody's, open a book and say, let's on this page, let's play through it together. Let's play the example together. Let's talk about what it is. Where are the intervals? Where are the tensions in this line, if there are any? How could this fit, for example, if we're playing a standard that we know already, or a simple tune like a minor blues, something simple. So basically then taking a piece of theory and putting it into context of the song that you like to play, so that you see pragmatic examples of how to apply this information. So it doesn't just stay in the realm of theory, but becomes something that you can practically apply. And if you're hearing somebody solo on something, saying, okay, what are they playing over this minor chord? Here's the major 7, clearly it's melodic minor or harmonic minor. So basically, again, repetition gives you the ability to not only have access to these sounds when you solo on them, but also to be able to identify quickly what someone else is playing. And if you're playing in real time with somebody else, if I'm playing with another chordal instrument, which I do sometimes, two guitars occasionally, piano sometimes, it's really helpful for me to know what I just heard, what the other musician played, if they're copying for me or if I'm trying to comp for their solo. And our goal is not to copy each other, but to have a good conversation. So the more information I can identify, hopefully the more nuanced and interesting that conversation can be.
Nice. So one thing before I hand it back to you, just the final thing, it's you can go to guitarvivo.com and go to the bookstore, see the book. It's a pre-order now, so we're doing a special offer. It's just $15.99 for the pre-order, and if you order it, you'll get an email in the next 24 hours to confirm if you want the PDF or the paperback, and we'll get your address if you want the paperback. So look out for that email. Okay, cool. Sales pitch done for a bit. I'll probably be back later to push it again. But the next mode is, probably one that had a light bulb moment for me when we were going through the material for the book. And I feel incredibly stupid, like looking back, going, why had I never considered this? But one thing you talk about is how these modes that maybe don't necessarily contain the chord tones can fit many different chords if you just gesture in and include the chord tones, like how you could use Phrygian on a dominant chord if you gesture in the major third, and you shouldn't just write off scales for not containing the material of the harmony, and how fluid.
I think part of it also is just, as you touched on something important here. When I'm playing any mode, regardless of how much tension is involved, I try to, and we have some examples of this in the book, I will reference the basic chord tones, whatever the chord quality is. So if I'm playing C melodic minor, I might also play a little bit of C Dorian. So we're hearing how the major and minor seventh interval can interact together over a minor chord. So if I see, there's only one note difference, as you know. So there's my major and minor seven together. So melodic minor and Dorian can kind of coexist. Dorian and melodic minor whole tone below is that sound of straight Dorian and Phrygian and Dorian flat two. So there's Dorian in C, and there's melodic minor. There's my B flat melodic minor whole tone below. So whatever, and we might get into discussions of melodic minor modes that reference tensions over dominant, over major, and so forth. But the point being, anytime I'm soloing, some of my line has the basic, really basic arpeggios of the seventh. Either it's major, minor, or dominant, because half diminished is a kind of minor, and diminished is in most cases a kind of dominant. So I'm using the basic chord tones, kind of mixed in with whatever particular mode I'm using. So I'm hearing that interaction of the foundation of the harmony with the tensions. And that to me is critical. So we want to have, some of the basic simple sounds of reference. So that's, anything if it's done all the time is boring. So if I'm playing lots of tensions only, even if it's well played and interesting harmonically, that's going to sound predictable after a while too. So I'm trying to balance tension and consonance, dissonance and consonance.
Nice. And the way you think about, say what you were just doing there, combining, well, not what you're doing there, well, combining Dorian with the Dorian flat nine, you're not just thinking about those things on top of each other. So you're not just playing like root, flat nine, nine, flat third. You're spending time in one world and then spending time in the other, right? To balance out.
Right. That's right. We can do it with chords too, Luke. So I can take a simple C Dorian, and there's my B flat melodic minor. So any kind of C Dorian. So there's B flat and C Dorian, and B flat melodic minor. So there's Dorian, there's melodic minor, there's melodic minor, whole tone below. So again, I'm thinking C minor the whole time there. But his variations on C Dorian, C melodic, and now B flat melodic. There are other possibilities too over minor chords, of course, but that's one little exercise. I think if you just run up and down the arpeggios slowly, Luke, without necessarily trying to play an amazing solo, you just start to at least hear the sounds. If I go up a Dorian arpeggio and come down a melodic, or go up a C melodic and come that doesn't sound like a solo, but it's giving you the sounds of those two particular minor tonalities together. And then over time, it does become melodic. You know, try to write a melody. I mean, we have some etudes in the book that demonstrate this. You know, again, don't be afraid to copy someone else's melody if you like it. But the idea with anything that you're learning, be it a transcription or taking a portion of a book that you like, could be just one or two bars of something. Then try to create your own variations. Simply change the order of the notes, even keep the same harmonic information, change the order of the notes. You know, over time, I think the goal is to find your own voice. That's why we study. I mean, if you really love someone and want to more or less copy them, that's also okay. There's some people who sound a lot like somebody else, and maybe they're doing just fine in terms of their musical careers because people like that sound. But, you know, again, some little voice in my head said, listen, but don't copy. So I just tried to create my own vocabulary using some of these approaches to theory that we're talking about.
Nice. And I imagine, yeah, that path to creating your own voice requires a lot of exploration, a lot of
Yes, it does.
Sounding bad.
Well, and I'm still in the process of trying to discover my voice after I've been working on this probably since 1971 or two when I got this information from Link Chamberlain and John Mahagan. And I can tell you, I'm still trying to refine it and play it better. So part of your journey is embracing your role as a student because that never changes. I feel like my best work with luck might still be ahead of me. And there's sometimes when I don't like my playing at all, sometimes I hear myself thinking, for whatever reason, I'm not inspired. The sound isn't great. My hands are cold. Something's happening that's interrupting the flow. So, you know, that's kind of the joy and the frustration of being a musician, finding slow progress that's still possible, even having done this for many, many years, and not always liking what you're hearing. So, you know, my goal now is to try to think about whatever I'm playing as a melody. I don't want to think about it as a lick or theory. I'm trying to find a melody, and that melody could come from the melody of the song, just my notion of how to play melodically through changes. And sometimes I hear myself and I think, this sounds like you're playing a melody here. This is my goal. Other times I hear it and I say, well, it's maybe kind of interesting harmonically. I can see what I was trying to do. I can justify it theoretically, but it doesn't sound like a melody. So, you know, another thing I say to guitar players, which is slightly off topic here, leave a little space and slow down so we're not locked into our memorized licks and fingerings. Try to find a melody. And to me, some of the best players very often play very slowly, including Jim Hall, sometimes just playing one or two notes and letting it ring and see how that kind of fits in with the overall mix with the other musicians that you're playing with. And that's the best musical choice at that moment. So we can get so wrapped up in all this complex theory that we're trying to learn and then feeling excited about starting to be able to apply it in our playing. But I think we have to be careful about sounding too technical or too complex, because then the melodic element might tend to get lost. I think you can tell when someone's playing a worked out lick, including me. You know, you hear something that sounds like a worked out pattern, even though it's very interesting. And there's a place for some of that in the music, but I think, you know, my goal is to try to be in the moment as an improviser and create something that feels like a melody. That's what all this study is about, just having access to sounds and then using them in the way that feels like melodies. That's my goal. Don't always succeed, but I should try.
Nice. Right. So we've touched on two minor modes.
Mm-hmm. There's one other one. Should we grab
Should we finish the minor first? Yeah.
So we have one more, and this is the sixth mode. And this can apply both to half diminished and more broadly to minor. So if this is the key center, this would be the equivalent of melodic minor, a minor third above. So I'm just taking these all in the key of C rather than doing them relative to one scale so we can hear them, because sometimes if you're sitting on a minor chord for long enough, you can potentially pull these together in one key. That's why we're discussing them all in one key. So if I'm thinking E flat melodic minor, which is a minor third above C, that would give me essentially Locrian. The name of the mode is Locrian sharp 2. So here's a straight C half diminished, very simple half diminished chord, just minor 7 flat 5. The G becomes a G flat. And what the E flat melodic minor gives me that's not contained in the half diminished scale is that natural 9. So technically it's not really a sharp 2, but that's the name of the mode. So if I take a basic C half diminished arpeggio, again, we want to use the basic arpeggio of the chord quality as a reference and a foundation that we mix together with, in this case, the melodic minor mode. Basic C half diminished is going to be C, E flat, G flat, B flat. So here's half diminished. There's half diminished, which happens most often, look, if you're resolving back to a minor chord, or sometimes if we're going down chromatically, we can a slightly different version of a turnaround rather than a 1-6-2-5 or a 3-6-2-5-1 might be flat 5 half diminished, 4 minor, 3-6. So if I was trying to resolve down, those are the two situations where you find half diminished used most often as a 2-chord if you're resolving back to minor. So if I'm resolving to B flat minor, normally 2 is half diminished. So basically, those are the two spots where you encounter half diminished most often. If I play an E flat melodic minor arpeggio, which is going to be E flat, G flat, B flat. So the note that is not contained in the half diminished scale that the E flat melodic minor gives us as that 6th mode is the 9. So I might use an E flat melodic minor voicing. There's minor major 7, but I'm thinking of that as C half diminished. So here's a basic C half diminished. Normally that scale would not have a D, but would have a D flat in it. But what the E flat melodic minor is giving me is the D natural. So that means every position if I put that C in the bass. So we're hearing basically. So in every position, I'm using that E flat melodic. And I'm referencing that D natural, which is not contained in the basic C half diminished scale. But I think also more broadly, why not just think of that as C minor 9 flat 5? And it just kind of sounds like a Dorian that has a blues element to it because it has a flat 5 in it. So I won't limit that only to half diminished. I'll also play that over a Dorian if I see C minor, which good default mode for minor is usually Dorian. That's the mode that has the least tension as a minor sound. So if I go back and forth between C Dorian and E flat melodic minor, I have. So it can also more broadly be C minor, yeah? Now here's something interesting, Luke. We can also use arpeggios of the relative major over minor. So I could go back and forth between E flat major for C Dorian, which is minor 9 or minor 6/9. And all I'm doing is the G natural becomes a G flat. So here's minor 9 flat 5. If I take a lid in, that's minor 6/9. So I can go back and forth also between E flat lid in and E flat melodic minor. So here's lid in. So there's E flat lid in. And E flat melodic minor. So that's just some simple ways to kind of combine sounds to give us some interesting minor sounds.
So that's kind of just for those that didn't understand me earlier because we hadn't covered this yet. That was a big light bulb moment for me because in my mind, when I was taught this stuff at university, college, it was, oh, the 6th mode is a half diminished chord, so you will play that only on half diminished chords. But in reality, if you want to, if you can play it over minor chords, and you can reference the minor harmony if you want to, right?
Correct. Basically, that flat 5 is not a giant stretch, Luke. It's just a blues scale, right? So flat. So I'm thinking, yeah, correct. This is definitely half diminished, but it also is minor 9 flat 5. Why not think of it that way too? I might put the 5 and the flat 5 in there together. As Bill Frisell. There's 5 and flat 5 together. In this case, I can use the open G string. Or I could play it here. I could play it. So I might create a little exercise. So again, I'm thinking C minor here. I'm not thinking C half diminished there. And again, going back and forth between E flat major for C minor 9 and E flat melodic minor for C minor 9 flat 5. So here's E flat major. So that, again, the way to get a particular sound into your ear is to play it over and over again. create a little drill with a friend. You're playing slow bossa nova. Back and forth between C, Dorian, E flat melodic minor. So again, these little drills are reinforcing sound through repetition, basically.
This is a bit of a tangent, well, just on what you said. I've always been someone who struggles to get sounds in my ears, so getting new sounds like this is very daunting. Do you have any recommended processes other than that? Do you sing them? Do you?
Singing is great. Singing is a great way to internalize too. My girlfriend Candace is a singer, and we'll sit around and sing intervals sometimes. If I'll help her do, she doesn't have a lot of formal training with harmony, but she's got a good ear. And her granddad actually was a great jazz clarinetist who played with Tommy Dorsey when Frank Sinatra was in the band and Harry James. So, so she's been around jazz her whole life and she loves it. And now she wants to sing more of it. We've been doing it for 3 or 4 years together now, and she's getting better. So I'll say to her, okay, here's a specific tension in this melody. Here's what the tension is. Let's sing it together. And it helps her to learn it. But she's also attaching a little bit of theory to what that melody is. So, if you're looking at someone else's melody, either a portion of the solo or an actual melody of the song, take a look at those intervals. Singing them is great, but also attaching some theory to what you're singing. So if you understand that something is minor major or minor major 9 or minor major 9 flat 5, whatever it is you happen to be doing, or minor 9 flat 5, which is what this melodic minor mode gives us that we've been talking about, that 6th mode, but also understand that that's half diminished. So the idea is to sort of transition from theory to vocabulary. And that's what the repetition gives us. So creating a little drill or taking a song that you know already and deciding in advance to make all the minor chords minor 9 flat 5 by playing melodic minor, a minor third above every one of them, could be minor blues. So if I'm going from C minor to F minor, it's going to be. And then. So that's pretty dissonant if you're not used to hearing it. But if you play it enough, you get a sense at least of what it sounds like. And that may be more of the realm of theory than something you actually play. But you might. So again, the idea is sort of discovering a set of musical values that resonate with you. Part of this also is interacting with other musicians, either who have shared vocabulary that you can talk about together, or maybe they have another approach to this and you're discovering some other ways to apply it by interacting with them and explaining your studies to them. Create an environment where it's fun to learn, Luke. So sharing this information with your own teacher, your own peers, people who are interested in having these discussions. And again, the discussions are about giving you access to sound. It's not about theory when you're improvising. I try to turn my brain off when I'm playing a solo. I don't want to be thinking. I just want to have access to sounds that I like. And hopefully I'm playing some melodies. So the ultimate application of all this is very simple: to play great melodies over any set of changes and have a good conversation with your friends in the music. That's what all this study and repetition and theory is for. It's not about playing complicated sounds. It's not about playing things that are difficult. It's about your version of what a melody is. And that can change depending on who you're playing with and who you're studying with and what books you're looking at. But try to make the journey fun and try to keep yourself engaged, which is why I'm still engaged in this. As long as I've been doing this, I still want to do it better. One of the reasons I like teaching and explaining it, it helps me play it better by explaining it. And it's also very gratifying to see other people picking up on it and maybe creating their own variations that offer some insights to you if they share it with you. Sometimes I've had people kind of circle back after a couple of lessons and say, yeah, that was interesting. Here's what I've done with it. And I say, wow, that hadn't occurred to me. That looks interesting. Let's explore that together. So that's another benefit to teaching some of this. Very often you'll get input from your students and peers about how they've approached the same information. So it's about just creating this environment where it's fun to keep learning, basically. That's what books and study and playing are all about.
Amazing. Actually, on the subject of teaching and playing and sharing these ideas, James Seabury's just commented, every time John comes to the East Coast, I get to hang with him and sit in. It's always eye-opening. So,
hey, James. Great. James is actually a retired judge who's quite a good guitar player. I mean, I'd call him at a professional level. So we met, I don't recall how we met initially. It might have been online when he bought one of my courses. But we've now sat in on some gigs together, and he's made some very long drives from where he lives in Providence, Rhode Island, to some jobs I've done in Massachusetts and Vermont. He's a great guy. And has this beautiful, infectious enthusiasm for the music. And now that he's retired from his legal profession, he's devoting, I think, quite a bit of time to playing. And he really loves it. And those are the kinds of students that are such a pleasure to teach, because their enthusiasm just makes it very enjoyable for you to share the information with them, because you know they're going to work on it.
Yeah. Actually,
Any other comments?
I think I recognise James's name. I think James has supported us before, and
I think he's maybe bought some of your books. I
yeah,
know he
maybe
knows.
Bruce's book.
He's probably bought one or two of Tim's books.
Ah, okay. Thank you, James. Right. So in the book, we go through every mode and we go through examples. For the sake of this, we haven't got time to go through every mode. I think one thing I'd love to talk about, because I know this is the one that everyone's most interested in, is the altered scale. If you could talk a little bit about that. And
absolutely. Well, again, it's basically a key as it relates to the original chords. So we've got 4 modes of a melodic minor. This is all covered in the book, all of which generate specific tensions over dominant. Before we do the altered scale, let me just touch briefly on the fact that that second mode that we talked about at the beginning of our session loop not only works for minor, but also works for dominant. So that flat 2, Dorian flat 2, could also potentially be 13 sus raised and lowered 9. So how do I differentiate B flat melodic minor as C minor versus B flat melodic minor as C7? I'm simply referencing a dominant arpeggio in the key of C with that same B flat melodic minor. Let's just do that briefly, and then we'll talk about the altered scale. So here's a basic C7 and B flat melodic. So the difference being I'm referencing the major as opposed to the minor third. And that minor third could also potentially be usable as a sharp 9 over the dominant. But in this case, let's just kind of stay away from the E flat as a note choice. So C7 and B flat melodic minor. So there's B. So again, C7, B flat. So the point being, B flat melodic minor does double duty. It can potentially be a minor chord, Phrygian 6, Dorian flat 2, or it can be a dominant chord. It's got a sus, so no major third, but I'll reference the major third from the original C7. If you're playing the arpeggio, it's flat 9, 13, and sus. If you play the scale, it has the sharp 9 as well. So it kind of sounds diminished because it has that character of raised and lowered 9 in it. So I'll go back and forth between C minor, either Dorian and melodic, and B flat melodic minor Luke, or C7 and B flat melodic minor. So that second mode does double duty. It can be both dominant and minor. So let's talk about the altered scale now. Basically, this is equivalent of melodic minor a half step above a dominant chord. So if I'm thinking not C minor now, but C7, again, I'll take basic C7 shapes, and I'm taking C sharp melodic minor. So if I play a C sharp melodic minor arpeggio, which is C sharp, E, G sharp, C, and I analyze that as the C7, I'm starting on a flat 9, major third, sharp 5. So if I'm mixing together now C dominant, and this is all in the book too, in terms of how I do this. Again, we want to reference some of the time in our line, we want to reference the chord tones of the basic chord quality, so we're hearing this interaction of tension and consonant, dissonance and consonance. So here's C7, which is just C, E, G, B flat. And here's C sharp melodic minor, C sharp, E, G sharp. If I put them together, so C, C sharp. This is C sharp minor major 9, but I'm thinking of that as. So again, I'm using minor major 7s or some of the harmonized scale too, but there's my. It's a simple exercise. I'm not sure if we did this in the book, but this is something you can do. Take any 4 notes of the C7, maybe even starting on the tonic, and then any 4 notes. Any 4 notes. Just grab them at random. It's not terribly systematic, but I just like the idea of being in the moment of just randomly. Could be a common tone, could be something a half step away. But in that sense, I'm not super organized. I just like kind of being in the moment and saying, okay, any 4 notes, any 4 notes, any 4 notes, any 4 notes. Now, tensions over dominant chords, Luke, are unique in the sense that it's the only one of the chord qualities in which tensions can create resolution. Meaning if I'm going from C7 to some version of F, could be a blues and they're both dominant chords, could be F, could be anything, then we want to hear those tensions creating resolution. So I can do this with chords. So I can use the chord shape for even just the basic arpeggios. So there's my C7 basic. So now we're hearing tension resolution. That could be in the context of a 2-5-1 or just a 5-1. Here's another little tip for guys. Anytime I'm sitting, I think we discussed this in the book, anytime I'm sitting on a chord for more than a bar, any chord in a progression, very often I'll play the 5 of that chord if it's not specifically referenced on the page. So if I'm looking at F major, C7 is not referenced. Maybe I'm starting a tune that starts with a 1 chord. I might slip in 1 or 2 beats of C7, and C7 could be altered. It could be the altered scale. So everyone else is playing F major, but for 1 or 2 beats, I'm playing C sharp melodic minor as C7. So in that case, the tensions are fulfilling a slightly different role because the tensions are moving me away from what's on the page and bringing me back again. So everybody's playing this, but for 1 beat, I'm playing that. So maybe. And maybe no one is playing this but me. So I might be playing, I'm thinking now F major, C sharp melodic minor. Going away and coming back. So we can do that in a kind of a prescribed way initially, maybe 1 bar of each. So that could be an exercise. But then eventually it can become a little less programmed and something where you might slip in a reference to a 5 chord just for a beat or two in a very subtle way that it's really not an issue if those tensions are being referenced because it's moving away from it so quickly. If you're analyzing, unless a piano player is comping for him or herself, if you're analyzing the content of a chordal instrument and the solo, very often things are not meshing exactly. They're not supposed to. We're kind of in the zone together. And that zone might involve referencing a 5 chord. And I do it all the time, not just over a 1, but over a 2 or 3. I'll play 5 of anything for a beat or 2 if I have enough time to do it. Then depending on whether or not there's another chordal instrument, that'll sort of shape my referencing too in terms of how I solo. But this notion of implied 5, so that means anytime we see a chord, we can play the 5 of that chord. So this opens up lots of possibilities for dominant chords as references that are not specifically on the page. That's a very simple reharm technique. Play 5 of whatever you're playing.
So when you're doing this, when you're giving us these snapshots of some melodic minor mode, you're not actually going to that mode per se. You're going to that mode's melodic minor, that mode's minor major 7, if that makes sense. So if you're in F major, instead of thinking, all right, now I'm going to play C altered, you think, now I'm going to play C sharp minor major 7.
Yes, although I'm thinking C altered. I'm thinking C7, although I'm playing that mode. I'm thinking C7.
Okay.
But that means lots of C sharp melodic minor shapes, Luke. Could either be F sharp or C7. So that's a C sharp minor major 7, but I'm thinking of it as a C7. So all these shapes, those are all C sharp melodic minor shapes, but they're also all C7 altered shapes. That's the 7th mode. So I'm thinking C7 while I'm playing C sharp melodic, while I'm thinking C sharp melodic minor shapes in this particular application, I'm thinking of it as the dominant chord.
So you've developed the ability to change how you think of that melodic minor shape depending on the harmony.
Yeah, exactly. I'm reinterpreting. I mean, any chord shape can be reinterpreted potentially 12 ways. And it doesn't work on necessarily predict really well on all 12 keys. But in this case, I'm thinking a melodic minor chord is a dominant chord in 4 keys to correspond to the 4 modes. We just talked about 2 of them, a whole tone below and a half step above. So I could go back and forth between B flat melodic minor and C sharp melodic minor. Those are both versions of C7, both of which could be referenced over an F major. So we're playing F major. So there's B flat melodic minor and C sharp melodic minor, my F major. Now, depending on how much time I have to play over that C7, I may not have time to play two, but I might. If it's F major for 4 bars, I can play lots of different variations on C7 just for a beat. I might just slip in and out. I love these little details, and I also love being able to hear someone solo and recognize the specific detail that they're referencing. That's what all this study is for. We want to make our ears smart. We don't want to be thinking while we're playing, and that's what the repetition. And I could be playing these sounds and not tell you what I'm playing. You might eventually figure it out, but I'm telling you exactly what I'm using. I'm telling you exactly what theory I'm using to create my lines. That's what we're trying to do in the book. All these beautiful sort of small variations on very specific tensions and embellishments that these melodic minor modes give us.
Gotcha. So I think because we can't cover everything, there's 2 other things that maybe we could just quickly run through. The first is given that we've now got a minor 7 flat 5 mode, an altered dominant mode, and a minor mode. Could you demonstrate a couple of 2-5-1 lines with some melodic minor applications?
So now, Baron, do you want these over? Do you want one to be in particular? We could just decide what one's going to be. It doesn't matter. Do you want one to be major, minor, or dominant?
I'll let you pick.
Well, let's say we're playing a 2-5-1, in which case let's make it major. So let's say G minor, C7, F major, and understand the fact, Luke, that in a real playing situation, we're not planning specific sounds we're going to use. We're in the moment together and reacting to each other. But as a drill, you can either create backing tracks for yourself or decide with a friend, let's play the C7 as a very specific version of C7. We can also touch very briefly on the other 2 modes since we're in the context of the 2-5-1 here. It's just 2 other keys we can run through quickly if you like.
Yes, you can run through those. You can tell us about how they
exactly
order from tension to...
Sure. Yeah, so we've talked about we've talked about the altered scale, which is the equivalent of melodic minor half step above, which we talked about, and the second one, which is the whole tone below, which has less tension by half. It's got the raised and lowered 9, but the altered 5s have gone away. And then the 4th and 5th modes are actually reversed. That's the equivalent of 5th and 4th above. So I can also play melodic minor a 4th and a 5th above to correspond to the 5th and 4th modes. So basically, if I'm looking at C7, this is all in the book, I can potentially use melodic minor chord scales and arpeggios, in my case, primarily chords and arpeggios, half step above for the altered scale, whole tone below for sus 13 raised and lowered 9, 4th above, that's pixelating flat 6, and 5th above, which is, no, that's reverse. 4th and 5th above are 5th and 4th above. 4th and 5th above are the 5th and 4th modes. Okay, I got that straight. So that would be the equivalent of F and G melodic minor, 4th and 5th above. So if I'm looking at C7, that can potentially be the altered scale. That's C sharp melodic minor. Whole tone below, which is 13 with a sus and flat 9. F melodic minor is flat 13. And G melodic minor is 9 sharp 11. So that means I'm using melodic minor chord shapes and arpeggios. And understand the fact that if we're playing a 2-5-1, I could go from a G Dorian to G melodic minor, and that's going to give me. I'll just go through them all methodically. Here's G minor, C sharp melodic. So G minor, C sharp melodic, to F, and it's the most tension. Here's G melodic minor, B flat melodic minor, which is 13 flat 9. Here's G minor to F. This is an interesting one because whatever key we are resolving to, we can play the melodic minor of the key we are resolving to as one version of a 5 chord. So G minor, F melodic minor. The only difference is the A flat becomes an A natural. So if I want to play an implied 5, I can simply go back and forth if one is major between melodic minor and major. So here's F major. So I'm just going back and forth between. That's the sound. So that's just really changing one note, but I'm thinking of that not as F melodic minor, but as C7. Again, here's G Dorian, G melodic, which in this case is C9 sharp 11. So they're all slightly different, but it's just the beauty of this is once you begin to develop melodic minor vocabulary, Luke, in terms of just understanding how to just execute and play melodically in using that particular sound, then we have all these beautiful variations by simply transposing those shapes to these 4 keys relative to one dominant chord. This is all in the book. So C7 can potentially be C sharp, B flat, F, and G melodic minor, half step above, whole tone below, 4th and 5th above. So anytime I see C7, it can be, there are other possibilities too with harmonic minors and harmonic majors. We'll talk about those perhaps in future books. We've got a little more in the works, I think. But the point being, I'm just thinking of these sounds relative to the basic dominant arpeggio, and then we're putting it in the context of a 2-5-1 and polite 5, etc. So it's a lot of material to work through, but I think the game plan and the understanding of the theory is relatively simple. And then it's a lifetime of refining these sounds, not only in terms of how you play them, but then how you relate to other musicians, how they play them. That's the journey that we're on. It's a lifetime of then refining it, but you can get started pretty quickly because the theory, I think, when it's laid out this way, is pretty easy to understand.
Fantastic.
And we welcome comments from your viewers.
What was that?
We welcome comments or questions from your viewers.
I've asked. I think everyone's good, but we've got another message for you. DB Music says, "Hi John, I hope you're doing well. Greetings from Ireland, and thanks for all your help in the past with my masters." From Dave White.
Oh, that's great. Well, please. Hey, Dave, how are you? Thank you for watching today. Hopefully, we'll see you again. I may be in Ireland this fall too, actually, maybe. So, I mean, one of the beauties of this is kind of sharing information and getting input and feedback from friends. So, you know, I'm very happy to hear from anybody. You can either pass along messages if you get them on your channel or your website. And it's just fun to be engaged with people and make it a conversation. I mean, I do this at clinics all the time. We've done clinics and workshops together. You were the one I did a few years ago at Oliver's, and then you and I spent time together last fall. And hopefully I'll see you in person maybe this fall too.
Definitely.
So yeah, anyone who would like to reach me, maybe we might do an event in person sometime too, if you'd like.
Oh, we've got a question from Dan Smith, a good friend of the channel. Dan Smith has asked, how would you personally include chromaticism into your melodic minor language?
That's a good question. Well, I think sometimes if you're, I don't consciously think about, oh, now I'm going to play chromatic line, but if you're combining some of these things, chromaticism just pops up naturally. So to go from an E flat major as C Dorian to E flat melodic minor, you have chromatic harmony there, the G and the G flat. So sometimes it's just kind of baked into a particular piece of theory. But I think, we don't want to overuse chromaticism because it's not predictable if you use it in a way that feels like it's programmed. So I just kind of do it. It sort of naturally evolves as a result of combining things. That's a very general answer to your question, Dan, but I hope that helps a little.
Oh, sorry, the chat's blown up over here. Got a few questions coming in. Okay. Sorry, yes. Tam has said, do you know Tam de Villiers? He says, just checking in here. Nice to see an old LCM colleague, that's me, interviewing one of his favorite underrated world jazz guitarists.
Underrated, definitely.
I was going to say to Tam, that's ironic because Tam is phenomenal. Tam is one of my favorite underrated jazz guitarists. Okay. He's incredible.
Is Tam where's he based?
Tam's in Paris. If you
in Paris, okay,
you guys should.
I might be. A small possibility I'll be in Paris maybe in November too. So please have Tam reach out to me if you'd like to, and I'll try to stay in touch with him.
Oh yes, do please. Or Tam, come home, come to England, and we'll do something together here.
Why not? Isaac
Negreen's asked, could John give some examples of 3-note voicing, harmonizing melodies with melodic minor?
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not, I think as I said earlier in the lesson, I'm not, in our session rather, I'm not super systematic that way, but just isolating chords of 3-note voicings. So I might take, there's C minor major 9. So all I'm doing is just isolating the chord shapes essentially. So there's melodic minor whole tone below. So I'm just grabbing kind of random chord shapes. So, as you can see, it's not super systematic, but I'm just using the chord shapes. And if you're comfortable with some hybrid picking, which I use, that's a little easier to isolate the 3-note voicings rather than doing with a pick. So moving up and down the harmonized scale with 3-note voicings is pretty easy to do. Sorry. So there's, let me try if I can do 3 here. So someone's even just taking a 3-note shape and just moving up. I'm not sure if that helps, but essentially just using, moving up and down the harmonized scale on different string sets with 3 notes should be relatively easy to do if you just decide to use some combination of pick and 2 fingers. Very general answer to the question.
I've got another question from Tam. Tam has asked, well, first of all, he said, would love to see you playing there in Paris. But he's asked, did Jimmy Weibel influence your playing?
Absolutely. So I learned about Jimmy from a friend named David Oakes, who redid Jimmy's 2 Lot of Improvisation book. Jimmy wrote that in the 70s. David redid it in the early 90s. And I got to know Jimmy a bit. And one of the things I took from Jimmy, besides inner voice movement, is breaking these chords down into shell voicings. So a lot of what I do is simply breaking chords down into smaller voicings. And I got that from Jimmy. So if I'm playing, so rather than play all the notes of the chord, and this has to do, again, hybrid picking is useful for this because you can isolate individual notes. So Jimmy had all these beautiful, so Jimmy's just breaking chords apart. And that's really my primary lesson from Jimmy, besides just his beautiful touch and his harmonic sensibilities. I watched him play some of his etudes at his house. I'm not sure, I might have actually played with him a little, but I mostly watched him. And he was also a very humble gentleman, very interested in what you were doing. He'd lean over and say, what was that voice that you just played? This is in his 80s. And there's some footage of him actually, when he's in his mid 80s, playing solo at a restaurant near his house near Pasadena, where he lived in. It's kind of near Los Angeles. And he hadn't been playing for a while in public. And he found a little Thai restaurant in his neighborhood where he'd go every Tuesday for free to play for the lunch crowd. And someone came in one day with a camera and sat right next to him and said, oh, Jimmy, could you play your arrangement of the Peacocks? And he'd say, let me think about that. Yeah, I remember that. And it's stunning to watch. It's really quite amazing. It just sounds like a little orchestra when he plays. And he played well all through his 80s. And I met him probably when he was in his early 80s. And Sid Jacobs, who studied with Jimmy, can play all those etudes, actually arranged some teaching for Jimmy, and they did a bit of touring together. And I'm not sure if they went to Europe, but they went to Argentina once, and Jimmy came to the East Coast a few times, and they organized some guitar gatherings for him there. And he was a great teacher and just a humble, wonderful guy. He truly was. So probably the thing I take away from him that I've used in terms of a specific influence is just this idea of breaking chords down into small shell voicings and thinking about a little voice leading on top. But he's got a number of books out that are terrific. And, it's really almost like learning classical music if you play the etude. So if you want to look at those, don't be intimidated by them. Just look at 1 or 2 bars of Jimmy Weibel, and you'll have just a wealth of information in terms of voice leading, inner voice movement, shell voicings, and so forth. Jimmy was wonderful. I'm happy I knew him.
Tam says, amazing, great to hear that. He was the one who asked that question. I love his etudes, and I worked with him with my guitar students in Montreal Conservatoire.
Fantastic.
Would you be interested in doing a workshop at his conservatoire?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, so
He's in Paris.
Tam's based in Paris. Sure, just reach out to me, Tam. What's the best way? I don't know if Tam's on Messenger or maybe through you if I can get an email, and I'll send Tam a bunch of. I can send recent recordings. I'd love to be in touch.
If anyone wants to get in touch with John, you can always message me, because John, you had some problems on Facebook. You lost an account. You've got an account, so you might get the wrong account. So if anyone can't get through to John, message me and I'll make sure you get the right account.
Thank you very much, Luke. I appreciate that.
No worries. Well, this is a terrifying chat. We've got some phenomenal players in here, from Isaac, Dan Smith, and Tam. Probably the scariest chat I've ever had in one of my sessions.
I'm happy that the folks checked in.
You've attracted some heavyweight players.
Well, I'm happy to meet the guys too in person. I hope I can.
Definitely. John, thank you so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure, Luke.
It's every time. I mean, we've had so many of these calls. We've spent so much time together, and I've always learned something new, and I always come away inspired. So thank you for that. It's really special. It's really a pleasure. Thank you to everyone in the chat who's tuned in and been with us for this 90 minutes. If you guys are watching this on replay, you can don't forget to check out the book at the link below. It comes out on the 15th. If you get the pre-order, you get I think it's about $5 off, and I'll contact you if you've ordered it to sort out shipping or PDF versions. Anything else to add? Anything we should look out for? New albums, new music?
Yeah, I mean, nothing. I've got actually, there's a young guitarist in the Bay Area, a younger guitarist who's quite good. I met him through my teacher, my friend Rick Vandiver, who was his teacher. This is Bay Area, Northern California. And my friend is named Jason Kaiser. And he's a really interesting younger guitar player who's on the scene working really hard with projects, social media. And he's hired me for actually 3 different recording projects, playing with him as a sideman. But I get tons of space on all of them. And the 2 that are out, one is out, and perhaps another one will be out on my label, Origin. He did one of Woody Shaw's music. So there's 2 guitars, baritone, trumpet, bass, and drum, like a really unusual lineup doing all Woody Shaw tunes. That's called Shaw's Groove. And the one we just recorded might be of interest to your listeners because it's a man who spent a lot of his career in London, Kenny Wheeler. So the new record is more like chamber jazz. It's 2 guitars, voice, trumpet, and tenor, doing all Kenny Wheeler tunes. And that's not out yet. I'm not sure if he has the title for the recording yet, but keep an eye open for Jason Kaiser, Keiser. So I'm on 3 of his as a sideman. Not sure what I'll do next in terms of my own projects, but if folks are interested, I've got a pretty large catalog of probably 25 plus CDs on the Origin label, which is originarts.com. You can see their site. They've got 750 CDs in the catalog. Seattle-based great indie label run by 2 drummers, one of whom I played with, John Bishop. And it's a great little label. They've been around for 25 years now. And Jason has one. The Shaw's Groove record is out on Origin. I think he'll submit this new one with the Kenny Wheeler tunes onto Origin as well. Maybe that'll be out this year.
Fantastic. So you guys know where to go. Again, if you have any questions, you can always get in touch with me. It's luke@guitarvivo.com, and I can point you in the right direction if you're struggling to find an album or anything. Okay, well.
Great, Luke.
Thank you so much. I'll message you on Facebook, and we'll catch you up in a bit. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.